Hi, everybody. I want to take a minute to talk to you about some common environmental contaminants that you might find on sites when you're conducting a Phase 1 site assessment. But I want you to note that all of this information comes from EPA's Common Chemicals Found at Superfund Sites document, which is also posted to the course. So I'm not going to take a ton of time really reading about each one of these individually because I feel like you can read through this material on your own. So I just want to highlight important aspects of each one of these chemicals. So just because I don't read the information directly off the slide doesn't mean that what is written on the slide isn't important. I expect you to be able to know both what is written on the slide and the important things that I highlight when I'm talking about these chemicals. So let's start with ammonia. So ammonia is not necessarily what we would consider a hazardous waste in terms of long-term toxicity. It really doesn't persist in the environment. The biggest issue with ammonia is that it can burn your body tissue. If there's a spill and it's an acute spill, it can cause damage to people's skin or their lungs when they breathe it in. You would typically find ammonia anywhere you have refrigeration. So you may be surprised to find that an ice skating rink or a grocery store could be an ammonia source. Again, not a long-term problem, but something that could be an acute spill. Arsenic is very, very deadly. And actually in Delaware, we have tons of sources of arsenic because arsenic was commonly used in leather tanning. And downtown Wilmington had so many different tanning industries that there is arsenic all over the place in downtown Wilmington. Inorganic arsenic is more harmful than organic arsenic, and it can cause some significant health impacts. And as I said, downtown Wilmington has tons of arsenic resources. So all of that riverfront area that has been redeveloped has arsenic in the soil, and all of that arsenic has been capped so that people cannot come into contact with it and get sick. Asbestos was at one time thought to be a miracle compound. It's very, very fireproof and was used extensively in the construction industry. Spray applications of asbestos were banned in 1973 and other uses were phased out starting in 1989. But we used to put asbestos in everything. We would spray it on walls. It was in roof shingles. It was in wall siding. It was in floor tiles. We thought because asbestos couldn't burn, it was amazing. And we didn't understand that asbestos was harmful for quite a long time. Now, just because asbestos is present doesn't mean that it's a danger. Asbestos is only really dangerous when it is what is called friable, which means that it can break off into and kind of float around. So you see all these tiny, tiny little particles and how easily it is to break off this asbestos. So this is a picture of friable asbestos. But if asbestos is non-friable, say for example you have floor tiles but they're in really good condition, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's a recognized environmental concern, or it just means that asbestos could be present. Now, I want you to take some time to look through the building materials section of your book that talks about asbestos. There's a chart on page 176 that has some really great information about asbestos and when it started to be banned. But if you Google it, there's lots of really good information about asbestos containing materials. And then there's a really great chart on page 179 that shows when certain asbestos containing materials were kind of developed. So that's table 9.3 in your book. And then table 9.4 also has some good information about different types of asbestos containing materials. So remember, just because asbestos is present doesn't mean it's automatically an emergency. It just means that we have to make sure, we have to look and see, is it friable or non-friable? And if it's friable, then we're concerned. I expect you to memorize these phase-out dates that are in table 9.1 on page 176 of your textbook. Benzene is an environmental solvent, it's a solvent, and it's considered toxic. Beryllium is a heavy metal, comes from coal burning and fuel oil, and its primary path of exposure is inhalation. Cadmium is another heavy metal. This is found quite often in metal plating, batteries, and paint. Carbon tetrachloride can be found in air and may be dissolved in water. It's used as a degreaser, refrigerant, or propellant. Chloroform is used as a refrigerant. It can be found in pesticides and dyes and can also be used as a solvent. Chromium is another heavy metal. Copper is considered another heavy metal. Cyanide can come from the burning of fossil fuels and chemical processing. There are many serious health effects with cyanide, including death. DCE, or 1,1-dichloroethene, is used in plastics and flame retardants. Dioxin is hugely toxic. If you've heard of Agent Orange, Agent Orange is a dioxin. It's an herbicide. It will kill all of the plants and trees that it's sprayed on very, very quickly. Ethyl benzene can be found from burning fossil fuels. Lead. Let's take a minute to talk about lead. Lead is incredibly toxic. It was used in chemicals and paint, and it was actually in leaded gasoline. Lead can cause very, very serious neurological effects, especially in small children. So it causes brain damage. All babies that are born in the United States are tested for lead at birth and then again at 2 years old to make sure that their lead levels aren't too high. This is still something that we can find happening in children because lead was used in paint, and lead paint wasn't banned until 1978. So any structure built before 1978 could potentially have lead paint. Now, again, like asbestos, just because lead paint is present doesn't necessarily mean that it's a problem. Are people exposed to that lead through the paint chipping or through dust that's created from the paint in the air? So if there's dust or paint chips, then lead paint is a very big concern. I expect you to know that lead was banned in paint after 1978. Lead was also put in gasoline, and it was banned in 1996. So you can find so lead was also in gasoline through the 90s. Mercury is a heavy metal. It's an inorganic environmental pollutant. It's very persistent in the environment. Did you know that you're only supposed to eat tuna once a week because of mercury? So mercury bioaccumulates in your body. So hopefully you remember that bioaccumulation means that it builds up in your body tissues the higher you go up in the food chain. So it can cause permanent damage to the brain, to kidneys, to developing fetuses. It's very, very toxic. We used to have mercury in like thermometers. They used to let kids play with it in school. So mercury used to be very common, but it is no longer out there in the environment. So I'm going to pause this video now, and then we'll come back and jump in. I just don't want to make the video too long.